My wife offered me like a used napkin. That's how it started. We were mid-dessert at her father's birthday dinner. 9 of us packed around that too-narrow oak table in their overpriced colonial-style dining room. Her father was retelling some story from the 80s about how real men didn't wear sunscreen. Her brother was checking his phone under the table like a bored teenager. And then, without prompt, without reason, she raised her glass, smirked like she was doing a comedy set, and said it. Being married to him is awful. You can have a turn, she laughed, nodding to her younger sister, who was spooning creme brulee like it owed her money. There was a beat of uncomfortable laughter. Her brother gave a choked chuckle. Her mother smiled like she'd misheard. But the other men at the table? They didn't laugh. They were all over 50. They'd heard that tone before. The thin, sharp edge of a woman disguising disdain as humor. I saw it in their eyes, sympathy and relief that it wasn't them. Then came the next blow. Her sister didn't miss a beat. She leaned in, tilted her head like she was thinking it over, and said, "Sure, why not?" Then she slid her chair 2 inches closer to mine and tapped her glass against mine. That sound, glass on glass, was louder than it should have been. Or maybe everything else just felt quiet. My wife froze. Her smile lingered for a half-second too long, like it was glued on. She was waiting for me to laugh it off, waiting for me to act wounded, to say something snarky, maybe storm off. Instead, I just looked at her. No words, no raised voice, no sarcasm, just one long, unreadable stare, like she was a glitch in the software and I was watching the system fail. And that was worse than any reaction she expected. Her sister giggled again. What? Just having fun. She leaned back and took another bite, like the whole thing hadn't just cracked something wide open. You ever feel your body go cold, but your mind stays razor sharp? Like a switch flips and the noise around you dims, but suddenly everything in your past snaps into clarity? I wasn't humiliated. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry. I was activated. And let me just say this, since most people who watch these stories don't actually subscribe, you might want to. Because what follows? It's not just revenge. It's what happens when a quiet man finally decides to speak the only language his wife truly respects: consequences. So I sat there. I finished my dessert, listened to the rest of her father's stories, laughed politely when I was supposed to. I even complimented the wine her brother brought, dry, overpriced, and about as forgettable as he is. But I never looked at her again. Not that night. Not once more. She tried to make eye contact twice. I saw it in my peripheral. That soft panic when a joke doesn't land, and suddenly the oxygen in the room changes. It wasn't a joke, though, and she knew it. I caught the slight tremor in her hand when she picked up her fork again, the way she blinked too many times, the almost imperceptible glance she shot her sister, the kind women trade when one of them has stepped too far. But her sister just kept eating, like nothing had happened, like she'd already made her decision about who she respected more in that room. When we got home, she tried to play it off. God, relax, she muttered, taking her earrings off by the hallway mirror. It was a joke. You really need to grow a thicker skin. She didn't even look at me when she said it, just kept unhooking her necklace, as if we were talking about the weather. I said nothing, just hung my coat, walked past her, and shut the door to my office behind me. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing more than the person trying to hurt you. 12 years ago, her sister came to me broken, crying. Their father had said something vile, something that could have ruined her, something no one else in the family ever acknowledged. I'd helped her, protected her, filed things, recorded things, stored things, quietly, legally, not because I expected gratitude, but because I believe people should be protected when they can't protect themselves. That night, after the dinner, I opened the old drawer behind the mantel clock, the one she's never touched because it's dusty and depressing. Inside was a sealed envelope, signed, dated, witnessed, my insurance policy, my lever. She didn't know I had it. She also didn't know what her sister's smirk really meant. She thought she was the center of gravity, the sun everyone orbited. But me? I'd just discovered how sharp silence can be when you stop using it to endure and start using it to prepare. I stood in the doorway of my study for a full minute before crossing the threshold. That room had always been mine, not just by square footage, but by exile. She hated the carpet, said the antique books smelled like old men and mothballs. Her exact words. Once, she joked to her friends that walking into it felt like stepping into a dusty podcast. I didn't correct her, just let her have the laugh. But that room was where I kept things I didn't trust to memory. The mantel clock still ticked slow and steady. A retirement gift from a job I once loved. Before she convinced me it was time to evolve, I reached behind it, found the hidden groove in the mahogany, and slid open the panel. The lock clicked. Same dull click it had made for years, except this time, it sounded like a countdown starting. The folder was still there, wrapped in wax paper, banded shut with a leather strap. I pulled it out and laid it on the desk like I was unearthing something fossilized. 12 years ago, her sister had sat in my car for over 2 hours, shivering despite the heat. She had mascara streaked halfway down her cheeks and a busted thumbnail from nervously picking at her jeans. I remember she kept apologizing, for crying, for calling me, for existing in that moment. And I remember what she told me. Word for word. A family disagreement. Her father's voice turning from disappointment to threat. A hand slamming a door a little too hard. A warning that if she twisted the truth, he'd pull her college funding. I didn't know what to do that night. So I did what I do best. I documented. I drove her to my friend's office, a lawyer who owed me more than a few favors. He took the statement. She recorded her own message. I took photos of the bruises she didn't want anyone else to see. We kept it sealed, notarized, time-stamped. Just in case. She never asked for it. Never brought it up again. And I never told anyone, not even my wife. Because I knew the family would have buried her if I had. But that smirk at dinner? That careless flirtation tossed like gasoline across a birthday cake? It told me something loud and clear. She didn't remember that night. But I did. The envelope weighed more now than it did back then. Not physically. Paper weighs what paper weighs. But emotionally, it felt denser. More volatile. What made it worse was the contrast. 12 years ago, her sister was scared. Innocent, in a way her older sister had never been. And now? Now she was weaponizing proximity like it was a game. Like slipping her chair closer was harmless. I opened the envelope, checked the contents. All still there. The affidavit. The audio file saved on a thumb drive. The photo sheet. Even the post-it note her sister had written in shaky cursive. Please don't let them change the story. I hadn't. But now the story was changing anyway. And it was time to decide who controlled the next chapter. I slipped the contents into a smaller folder. Labeled it with one word. Reminder. Then I took the envelope and resealed it inside a fireproof sleeve. I wasn't planning to use it. Not yet. But I needed her to remember that power doesn't always come from volume. Sometimes it comes from patience. From restraint. From being the only person in the family who knows what silence costs. When I walked back upstairs, she was already asleep. Or pretending to be. I watched her for a moment. The same woman who'd once cried over old poetry with me on the balcony of a cheap Airbnb. The same woman who now laughed at me over wine glasses in front of her family like I was a dusty relic she'd outgrown. She'd been the flame. Charming. Brilliant. But flames burn out. What remains? Ash. And whoever holds the match. She didn't even stir as I stood in the doorway. I almost said something then. Something final. Cruel. Sharp enough to draw blood. But that would have been satisfying for her. She thrives on reaction. Drama. Instead, I simply turned and went back downstairs. I placed the folder in the lockbox. Sealed it shut. Then I opened my laptop and began drafting the first few steps. Not revenge. Not yet. But recalibration. Because the truth wasn't a weapon. Until she made it one. 3 days after the dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from our niece, Abby. Sweet girl. 22. The only one in the entire family with enough backbone to speak plainly. What did you say to Aunt Grace? She's been crying nonstop. I stared at the message for a long moment. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I was weighing the exact depth of what she meant. Crying nonstop? Grace? The same sister who just days ago had leaned in and offered to take a turn like I was some sort of rotating chore chart? I typed, we just talked. She's thinking. Then turned the phone face down. Upstairs, I could hear my wife on the phone. Her voice was airy, bouncing off the walls with that same shallow laughter she weaponized when she wanted to seem unbothered. Oh my God. Yeah. And then I said, you can have a turn. She cackled, retelling the moment like it was a scene from some hit sitcom. The look on his face. Priceless. Except it hadn't been. It hadn't been priceless at all. It had been an invoice. One she'd already started paying without even knowing it. She hung up a few minutes later and came downstairs, grinning like she'd just won something. God. People love that line, she said. Even Karen from accounting texted me about it. I gave a slight nod, eyes still on my laptop. Sure. That's when it began, the slow drip of silence from her side of the family. First, her sister stopped returning calls. That in itself might have seemed like nothing. Schedules. Mood swings. A missed text. But then her mother canceled Sunday lunch. No excuse, no reschedule, Just a flat, not this week. My wife noticed. Okay, what's with them? She asked, standing in the kitchen while flipping through her phone. Mom just bailed, and Grace still hasn't replied to my messages. Maybe they're busy, I said, stirring my coffee. She made a face. Busy? My mother lives for her damn roast chicken Sundays. She wasn't wrong. That woman once hosted lunch the same day her neighbor backed into her car. Blood feud on the front lawn, pie in the oven, all the same. But now? Silence. She tapped her phone screen harder than necessary. I'm telling you, they're being weird. I shrugged. Could be. Maybe you said something that didn't land. She scoffed. It was a joke. You sure? She shot me a look, then walked off muttering under her breath about everyone being so sensitive lately. Later that night, another message came in, this time from her older brother, the family's designated fence-sitter. He never picked sides unless absolutely forced to. That he messaged her directly said everything. Not sure what you said, but maybe try apologizing, before this turns into something worse. She read it aloud to me like it was absurd. Apologize? For what? I raised an eyebrow. Might be worth considering. To Grace? She flirted with you. I set my cup down. And you invited her to. Her mouth snapped shut, then reopened. That's not the point. Everyone knew I was joking. I didn't answer. Because no, everyone didn't know. And more importantly, Grace didn't think she was joking. That's the part my wife still hadn't wrapped her ego around. By now, the whispers had started turning. Not full-on rumors yet, just tension in group chats, less emoji-laced responses, missed calls with no callbacks. Aunt Trish left the family Facebook group chat. Her cousin Rick, the one who always posted fishing photos, had changed his cover photo from a Christmas photo of the family to just his boat. Small things, quiet things. But social gravity doesn't shift in earthquakes, it shifts in inches. Subtle, relentless, unspoken. She didn't see it. Not yet. She still thought she was the nucleus, the magnetic center. What she didn't realize was that loyalty in families doesn't break with fights. It breaks with clarity, with slow realizations, private conversations, and long memories. And they remembered things she didn't. Like how often she rolled her eyes at Grace's nonprofit. Like the time she accidentally told their cousin about Grace's therapy. Like how, at every family gathering, she interrupted Grace the moment she started telling a story. No one called it abuse. No one labeled it bullying. It was just dynamics. Until someone quietly shifted them. Someone with documentation. With memory. With motive. Someone like me. She went to bed that night more irritated than afraid. But I could feel it. That first tremor of uncertainty in her voice. Like a wine glass that rings slightly off-key. The first clue that maybe, just maybe, the whole orchestra wasn't playing her tune anymore. She still believed she had time to fix it. To joke her way out. Charm her sister. Reclaim her spot at the table. But power doesn't come from knowing who you are in a family. It comes from knowing who remembers what you did. It was a Wednesday, the kind of bland, forgettable midweek morning when nothing should happen. The sky was gray, coffee was lukewarm, and she was already 15 minutes late for her facial appointment, complaining loudly about how she had to Venmo the esthetician because the booking app was being stupid. Except it wasn't the app. She tried again, fingerprint scan, Face ID, password fallback. Denied. Then came the red error message, account locked, access restricted. I was in the kitchen, slicing into a grapefruit. She came down the stairs barefoot, clutching her phone like it had insulted her personally. Hey, she barked. Did you change the password on the bank account? I didn't look up. No. She raised an eyebrow. Well, I can't get in. Did you check the joint one or the trust? She blinked. What trust? Now I looked at her. Just for a second. Just long enough for it to land. The one backing your spa treatments, the lake cabin, and the down payment we made on Grace's grad school. She scoffed. Okay, what are you talking about? I set the knife down. The trust fund. You know, the one your father started after the settlement. The one I've been managing for the past 6 years. There was a beat of silence. Then she laughed, sharp, brittle, the kind of laugh she used when something scared her. You're bluffing. I shrugged. Okay. No, seriously, you're screwing with me. You can't just manage a trust. Oh, but I can. I'm the steward, remember? Your dad appointed me in 17 after your brother failed that background check for the mortgage fraud thing. Her face twitched. I thought that was sealed, she said quietly. It is, I said. Mostly. Anyway, since then, I've had full discretion on dispersals. You know that word, right? Dispersals? She didn't answer. She was scrolling again, fingers getting more frantic. Why would I be locked out? She snapped. I wiped my hands and looked her dead in the eye. Because I'm restructuring it. She crossed her arms. Why? I took a sip of coffee. Behavioral concerns. What the hell does that mean? It means there's language in the trust that allows the steward to withhold or reallocate funds if public actions compromise the family's reputation. See Clause 6b. You're making this up. Call your lawyer, I said flatly. Her eyes narrowed. You think you can just punish me by locking me out of my own money? It's not your money. It's family money. That's the part you never quite grasped. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. Let me guess, she snapped. You're giving it to Grace? That's what this is, right? Some twisted little plan to hand over everything to her because she batted her lashes and made you feel special for 5 seconds. Grace hasn't asked me for a dime, I said. But if she did, she'd get it. You, on the other hand, are now considered a reputational liability. That one hit. I watched the flicker of panic skip across her eyes like a crack in glass. She tried a different tactic. You can't do this. We're married. That's a joint account. No, I said calmly. You assumed it was joint. That account was connected to the trust. You had secondary access because I allowed it. Temporarily. That access has been revoked. She opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. Just a slight wheeze of disbelief. You're being petty, she whispered. No, I said, wiping the grapefruit juice from my fingers. I'm being procedural. She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. I walked past her, reached the drawer, and pulled out a single page. The stewardship agreement, notarized, time-stamped. I placed it gently on the island. You're welcome to review it, I said. But it won't change anything. That's when she screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain or fear. It was a scream of loss, like something massive had just been taken from her, and she couldn't even name what it was. But I knew. It was control. For years, she had assumed I was just the quiet one, the background character, the man who made the bills go away and the reservations appear. She didn't know I also made the rules. She stormed out, phone in hand, dialing someone, probably her brother, maybe her accountant. She still hadn't realized yet that they wouldn't be able to help her. The trust was airtight, and I had waited 6 years for her to give me a reason to turn the key. That morning wasn't about money. It was about leverage, and watching her realize she didn't have it anymore, that was worth more than the spa, the cabin, and every dollar she thought she was owed. It was just past 11:30 when the screen lit up. She was lying in bed scrolling through reels, cat videos, passive-aggressive skincare advice, and that blonde influencer who sold her own brand of grief crystals. Anything to distract from the fact that no one in her family was speaking to her. The tension had been building all week. Missed calls, cold replies, her mother's sudden obsession with needing space. Even her brother, who once called her during a colonoscopy because hospital Wi-Fi's good, had gone silent. She still hadn't admitted it out loud, but the edges were fraying. So when her phone buzzed with a text from Grace, her thumb paused mid-scroll. Grace, not in a group chat, not a forwarded meme, a direct message. It read, "You never asked what he did for me." No greeting, no smiley face, no sarcasm, just one sentence, and a video attachment. She stared at it for a moment, heart thumping faster than the TikTok algorithm could distract. Then she tapped. The clip opened in shaky 480p resolution, clearly recorded on an old phone. The angle was awkward, shot from the back seat of a car. But there she was, Grace, maybe 17, her hair longer, her eyes swollen, crying hard, the kind of crying you don't do unless something's been tearing at you for weeks. Not a tantrum, not performance. Real, raw, ruined. She recognized the car. It was his car, the one he'd driven before the hybrid, back when he still wore sport coats on Sundays and carried aspirin in the glove compartment, just in case. In the background, another voice rose, booming, slurred, unmistakably their father. "You will not make a goddamn scene in front of the church again, do you hear me? I built this family. I pay for your future. I decide when things are over." Glass shattered somewhere. A door slammed. Grace flinched and covered her ears. Then his voice. Calm. Measured. No hint of panic, just quiet steel. "She's done nothing wrong. She doesn't owe him silence." Grace shook her head through sobs. "They'll say I made it up. Mom already said." "I recorded the conversation," he said gently. "It's backed up and filed. And I got your statement notarized tonight." "Why?" she whispered. "Because they'll try to erase this. And I won't let them." The camera stopped there. She didn't move for a full minute. The silence in their bedroom stretched long and thin, the kind that has weight to it. She hit replay, watched it again. This time her breathing got shallow. She'd known something happened back then, but the family had papered over it, called it a misunderstanding. Grace had pulled away for a while, transferred colleges, switched majors. Her father's name had disappeared from her conversations, and she'd never brought it up again. Back then, she didn't ask questions, didn't press. She figured Grace was just being dramatic. Now she saw the truth. He hadn't been supportive. He hadn't just been there. He'd protected her. Legally. Quietly. Completely. She thought her sister was flirting with him at dinner, trying to get under her skin, playing some twisted little game. But Grace wasn't flirting. She was testing. Testing to see if her sister remembered what he'd done. If she still deserved him. And she'd failed. Miserably. That smirk Grace had given her at dinner, it wasn't a threat. It was a verdict. She had thrown away a man who once stepped in front of her own father's wrath to protect her little sister. All for a cheap laugh and a glass of wine. She opened their message thread, thumb hovering above the keyboard. Typed, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Then deleted it. Because she already knew the answer. She had made it clear, years ago, that she wasn't the kind of sister you confided in. Not when things got real. She turned to look at him. He was already asleep. Back to her. Breathing slow, one hand tucked under his pillow. Same way he'd slept for years. She reached out a hand, but stopped just short of touching his shoulder. Her fingers trembled. Because for the first time since the dinner, she realized she wasn't the victim here. She was the villain. The punchline that landed harder than she thought. The joke that fractured something already fragile. And now, the man beside her, calm, steady, fiercely loyal, was slipping further and further out of reach. And the worst part? She'd handed him every reason to let go. She didn't knock. She just shoved the door open like she owned the hinges, hair still wet from the shower she'd cut short. Wearing that oversized hoodie she always threw on when trying to soften the blow of her own outrage. She'd used it during arguments, during guilt-laced apologies, even once during a failed attempt to seduce her way out of a parking ticket. Not this time. This time, she stormed in with eyes blazing. "Why are you doing this to me?" she snapped. I didn't answer right away. I was finishing a note, pen to paper, no rush. She hated when I didn't look up immediately. Hated not being the emergency in the room. So I let the silence stretch, just long enough to make her squirm. Finally, I capped the pen, set it down, and turned to the file cabinet on my left. Second drawer. Thick envelope. Her name on the tab. She tracked every movement, nostrils flaring. "If this is about Grace, you're misreading everything. That little video? That's old. This isn't about Grace," I said, pulling out a single folder. "This is about you. And your behavior." I opened the folder and slid a page across the desk. She glanced at it, then narrowed her eyes. "I've seen this before. Have you read it?" "It's from 2009, she said dismissively. "That was for our tax filings. It was also for the trust." Her lips parted. Confusion crept in, uninvited. "Wait. No, this was just for splitting assets into separate holdings, remember? The accountant said it'd help avoid the new bracket." "Yes, that was part of it. But the other part is the clause you signed under Section 7C. She looked down. Her signature, bold, arrogant, 29-year-old cursive, sat neatly on the bottom of the page. I tapped the paragraph above it. "In the event of behavior that publicly compromises the family's reputation or standing, the trust steward may, without notice, revoke discretionary access to all non-essential funds associated with the offending party." She blinked. This wasn't explained. It was. "You didn't listen." She folded her arms. "You're twisting this. I made a joke. People laughed. Get over yourself. You didn't make a joke. You made a public offer." Her jaw tightened. "Are you serious? You invited your sister to take a turn at being married to me." She said, "Sure, why not?" and physically moved closer. "That's a proposal and a response. Public. Unprovoked. Recorded on multiple phones, judging by the number of dinner guests who haven't returned your messages since. You're twisting this into something it's not." "No," I said. "I'm using the contract. The one you signed." She snatched the paper off the desk and scanned it like she was trying to will a typo into existence. "You knew I didn't read this. And you knew I always did." Her breathing got shallow. "I swear to God," she said, "if this is your way of punishing me." "It's not punishment. It's stewardship. Your father handed me this responsibility because I was the one person in this family who never confused wealth with entitlement. I treat that trust like a legacy. And you? You treated it like a bottomless cocktail fund. That's not fair. You mocked me in public. You degraded our marriage in front of your entire family. You opened the door for your sister to step in. And now you're mad that the consequences you never thought would come have arrived." She dropped into the chair across from me like her legs had given out. "But I didn't mean it," she said, barely audible. I let that hang in the air. Intent doesn't matter when the damage is done, I replied. You know that. You've said it yourself. Multiple times, to multiple people, usually with a wine glass in hand. She looked smaller now. Not younger. Just reduced. Like someone had pulled the scaffolding from her ego and left her to balance on whatever pride remained. I'm your wife, she whispered. And for the first time, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a question. Yes, I said. You are. And you're doing this anyway. I looked at the folder again. You did this. I just followed the rules. She sat there for a while, trying to summon tears, or rage, or something that might work on me the way it used to. But nothing came. Because what do you do when the man you mocked, ignored, dismissed, turns out to be the one holding the ledger? She left the room quietly. No slamming doors. No final insult tossed over her shoulder. Just the sound of slippers brushing down the hallway, and the soft realization clicking into place. Her signature was the bullet. All I'd done was aim. The Sunday came like clockwork. It always did. Every year, without fail, her father's birthday was a loud, overcooked affair at the old family home. Plastic folding chairs dragged from the basement, tablecloths with wrinkles that never ironed out, and her mother's famous lemon meringue pie that was more air than substance. The wine was always bad. The political arguments worse. But still, it was tradition. And traditions, she believed, revolved around her. So when Sunday morning arrived and her phone stayed silent, no group text, no call from her mom, no, what time are you getting here? From her brother, she felt the first tug of unease. She tried to play it cool. She made coffee, scrolled, rechecked her notifications. Nothing. By noon, she broke and dialed her mother. Voicemail. She stared at the screen. No missed calls. No texts. Just a silent, unremarkable Sunday. A tighter squeeze now, like a belt one notch too tight. She texted Grace. Hey, what time's everything starting today? Haven't heard from anyone. Read. No reply. She waited 10 minutes. Then 20. Then stopped pretending she was fine. She pulled up Facebook, looking for clues. Anything. Even a blurry shot of the driveway, or a pie cooling on a windowsill. It hit her around 2:30 p.m. A photo. Posted by Grace. She almost didn't recognize the dining room. So neatly set, with candles and fresh flowers. The family had actually tried this year. At the head of the table sat him. Her husband. The same man she'd tossed under the bus for a wine-fueled laugh. The same man she hadn't looked in the eye for days. The man who had been slipping from her grasp like sand and now sat, calm and poised, as if he'd belonged there all along. Everyone else was there too. Her brother. Her mother. 2 nieces. Even her aunt from Wisconsin, who only flew in when someone died or got engaged. And her? Nowhere. Not even mentioned in the caption. It read, "Some men never stop protecting you, even when they don't have to." The comments poured in. "We love him. Such a class act. Glad Grace finally has someone in her corner. Best picture yet. Tell him the brisket was perfect." She stared at the screen, blinking, hoping maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they'd sent the wrong invite. Maybe this was just a smaller pre-gathering. A side event. Something. But it wasn't. It was the dinner. The one that, for 39 years, had always included her. And this year, it didn't. Her fingers hovered over the comment button. She almost typed something. Jokey, casual, masking her panic and sarcasm. Wow, forgot to send my invite. But she knew how that would land. Like a drowning woman throwing water. She dropped the phone onto the table. It skidded, knocked over a candle, and came to rest near her untouched lunch. No one had forgotten. This wasn't an oversight. This was a decision. Silent, deliberate, complete, and it had been coming for years. She thought she was the gravitational center, pulling everyone into orbit with charm, force, presence. But now the whole constellation had shifted, and she wasn't even a speck on the map. Her husband hadn't announced anything, hadn't made a scene, hadn't called her out or published some angry manifesto. He just showed up, and they'd let him in. Not grudgingly, not with compromise, willingly. Because families remember who shows up when it's ugly. They remember who listens, who protects, who sacrifices quietly while others perform loudly. She had confused attention for affection, control for connection. Now, she saw the truth in a single snapshot. Loyalty doesn't leave with noise. It leaves with silence. And now the silence was deafening. She tried her mother again. Voicemail. She tried Grace. Read. No reply. She scrolled back to the photo. Stared at her husband's expression. He wasn't smiling. He didn't need to. He already knew she'd see it. And he knew exactly what it would mean. He didn't say a word when she came home that night. Just glanced up from the cutting board, nodded once, and went back to slicing vegetables with the same slow, practiced rhythm he used for everything these days. Deliberate, measured, final. The table was already set. Her favorite linen napkins, the nice plates, the wine she used to like before she graduated to imported French bottles. The smell of rosemary and roasted garlic filled the air, but the silence swallowed it whole. She hovered in the doorway, hesitant. "I didn't know you were cooking tonight," she said, like it was normal. He didn't answer. She walked to the sink, poured herself water, then sat down across from him. "This looks great," she tried. Still nothing. He placed her plate gently in front of her, then sat down across the table, took his first bite, and chewed in silence. She watched him for a few seconds, waiting for a nod, a smile, a glance. Nothing. So she tried again. "You're really leaning into the whole silent monk thing lately." He kept eating. She forced a chuckle. "I mean, come on. Are we seriously doing this? Still mad about a joke?" No reply. She took a bite. Chicken. Perfectly cooked. Of course it was. "I said something stupid. You know how these dinners go. My dad. The wine, the pressure. You invited her to replace you." The words landed like a slab of concrete in her chest. He hadn't raised his voice. Hadn't even looked up. "I said it as a joke. You offered her a turn. She's my sister." She said yes. She dropped her fork. It clattered against the plate like an alarm going off. It wasn't serious. It was sarcasm. It was wine. I was. Truth with a laugh doesn't make it a joke. It just makes it more palatable. He finally looked up. His eyes weren't cold. They weren't even angry. They were done. And that was worse. "What more do you want from me?" she snapped, desperation climbing into her voice like a ladder she didn't know how to climb down from. "I said it was stupid. I admitted it was a mistake. What else do you want?" He took another bite, chewed slowly, then set his fork down with precision. "I want you to realize it wasn't a joke. You invited her to take your place. She accepted. I simply confirmed your request." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Because in that moment, with the candlelight flickering between them and the faint hum of the dishwasher in the background, she understood something she had avoided since the night of the dinner. He meant it. He wasn't negotiating. He wasn't punishing. He wasn't playing hard to get or making her prove something. He was done playing. This wasn't silence designed to make her apologize. This was silence designed to let her exit. And she could feel it now, slow, creeping, inevitable. The part of the relationship where the person across from you doesn't even need to raise their voice anymore. Because they've already moved on inside their own head. They've already packed emotionally and just haven't left the room yet. She looked around their kitchen, her kitchen, the one she had decorated with marble pattern tile and custom lighting, and that overpriced faucet she insisted on from that European brand. And yet, none of it felt like hers anymore. He had reclaimed this space, reclaimed his space, not with yelling or threats, but with a plate of roasted chicken and a dinner table she wasn't sure she belonged at anymore. "You're not serious," she whispered, eyes searching his face for some crack, some soft spot, some sign he'd forgive her like he always had. He reached for his glass, took a slow sip, then said, "You asked what I wanted. That was your first mistake. You don't get to ask anymore." She sat frozen. The food grew cold. He stood, took his plate, and walked past her. Didn't touch her shoulder. Didn't pause. And she realized, too late, that the scariest silence isn't when someone stops talking. It's when they've already decided you're not worth talking to. It arrived on a Tuesday, just after lunch, as she was sitting on the edge of the couch surrounded by unopened mail and half-drunk coffee. The doorbell rang, and by the time she got there, the courier was already halfway down the front walk, clipboard in hand, not even glancing back. No words, just a sterile nod. She looked down at the envelope. Thick, cream-colored, embossed. The kind lawyers use when they're trying to look polite about a punch to the throat. Her name typed cleanly in the center. She stared at it for a full minute, then peeled it open with trembling fingers. No need to sit. She already felt the floor pulling at her legs. Inside, 3 pages. 1 cover letter. 2 full legal enclosures. The heading read, "Notice of Separation and Trust Realignment." Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. She skimmed, then reread. Effective immediately. Clause 14C, behavioral violation. Public humiliation of spouse. Abandonment of marital dignity. Trigger activated as defined in 2009 addendum, paragraphs 4A through 4D. There it was. Cold. Clinical. Devastating. Page 2 listed the financial removals. Gone. Access to the discretionary funds. Gone. Her cabin in Maine. Gone. The luxury credit account linked to the family trust. Gone. Her monthly stipend for brand development, which she used for facials and influencer trips she never posted. Gone him. No accusation. No drama. Just reallocation. Mechanical. Like moving numbers on a spreadsheet. She sat down hard, paper shaking in her hands. Tried to read further, but the words started swimming. Her stomach churned. Then came the wave of heat. That sudden sick rush when your body realizes you're about to lose something you didn't even realize you took for granted. She reached for her phone with damp fingers and called the only person she could think of. Grace. She didn't pick up at first. 3 rings. 4. Then a click. Hello. She couldn't hold it in. I got a letter, she gasped. From him. He sent legal papers. It's over, Grace. He's cutting me off. He cited Clause 14C. Do you even know what that is? Silence on the other end. Then a breath. You really don't remember anything you signed, do you? Grace said softly. It was one stupid dinner, she cried. One comment. He can't erase me over that. Grace's voice didn't rise. It didn't scold. It didn't flinch. You handed me the torch, she said. He just made it official. Then she hung up. Just like that. No comfort. No alliance. No sisterhood. Just a click. And then nothing. She stared at the phone in her hand like it had betrayed her. For the first time in weeks, the tears came. Hard, ugly, wrenching sobs that curled her into herself like a child lost in the dark. Because this was the part she never saw coming. The part where actions had form. Where cruelty had documentation. Where jokes became rulings. And he hadn't screamed. Hadn't threatened. Hadn't begged her to reconsider or slammed a door. He'd let the system speak for him. The legal system. The family system. The system she thought she'd always be the center of. It was gone now. And no amount of apologies, texts, or regret could unsign what she had signed, or undo what she dared him to do. Because she finally understood. He didn't need revenge. He had infrastructure. 6 months later, the family met again. Same house. Same worn dining room chairs. Same clatter of mismatched silverware and overlapping voices. Someone had brought wine from a boutique vineyard this time, and her mother had dusted off the same yellowed lace table runner she always insisted was too good for just anyone. A cake sat under glass. There were candles, laughter, polished shoes tapping against the tile. But there was one key difference. She wasn't there, and no one asked why. No awkward silence. No murmured excuses. No, she's caught in traffic, or something came up. Her name didn't float once over that table. It was as though the collective had decided to let her absence take the form of silence. And silence, after all she'd said, was louder than condemnation. Instead, they talked about Grace's foundation, about the new mentorship program for young women in rural schools, about the grant funding that had come through, quietly, anonymously, until recently. That's when Grace stood. She was dressed simply. No flash. Just grace, fittingly. Her voice was soft but deliberate as she raised her glass. To those who protect, she said, her eyes flicking to him, seated at the head of the table, even when no one's watching, even when it costs them. There was a pause, then applause. Not polite, not performative, genuine, because they knew now, knew what he had done, what he had shielded, what he had withstood. He didn't smile, just nodded. It wasn't pride. It wasn't triumph. It was closure. Beside him, Grace didn't touch his hand. No romantic tension. No rumors to fuel. Just solidarity. A kind of unspoken contract between two people who had weathered something brutal and come through cleaner. Across town, in a beige condo that smelled of citrus cleaner and regret, she sat on a second-hand sofa staring at an envelope that had arrived earlier that day. No return address. But she knew. She peeled it open with the side of her thumb, tearing too quickly. The check inside was crisp, folded once. It was more than she expected, less than she'd hoped. The settlement was final now, split, signed, filed. She could have taken more if she'd fought, if she'd dragged it through court, but she'd seen what that would look like. Witnesses, exhibits, video, statements, photos. Clause 14C recited out loud in front of people with no skin in the game. She couldn't bear that, so she agreed to this. On the memo line of the check, in his handwriting, were 6 small words. For the joke. Thanks for the turn. Her throat closed. She looked around the apartment, furnished with sale items and discount rugs, nothing matching, nothing truly hers. She told herself it was temporary, told herself she was resetting, rediscovering. But she wasn't. She was replaced. Not romantically, not sexually, not even emotionally. She was replaced in the narrative. She had once been the story, the force, the one everyone watched, indulged, forgave. Now she was a footnote, a clause, a caution, and the man she thought was a prop in her performance, he had become the lead. Not because he wanted to be, but because when the curtain fell and the applause faded, he was the only one left standing in the light. Quiet, composed, surgical. And she was on the outside of a story she'd once owned, staring at a line written in ink that cost her more than any signature ever had. Because revenge doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just waits until there's only one seat left at the table.